Welcome everyone to another episode of Kiwi Talks. My guest today, he's a well-known composer. He's composed stuff like Order 1886, Deadspace, Far Cry Primal, plus many more things. We could be here forever if I listed every single thing, so I won't. Jason Graves, how you doing?
Hey Reese, how are you doing? Great to be here, thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's an honor to talk to you. For you to impart me with your knowledge.
Okay, sure. The honor is mine, all
Yeah.
the way from New Zealand. I think we're literally on the opposite sides of the world.
Close to it, yeah. I think the UK is probably the worst because I think it's exactly a 12-hour time difference. So not quite as bad. Yeah. But still,
Not quite.
But still, anywhere in New Zealand is on the other side of the world compared to pretty much every country. So,
Right. Well,
Yeah.
There you go. Fair enough.
yeah. So, I'm curious to ask about how you got your composing style, like how you formed it. Was it there from the get-go? Was it something that kind of developed over time?
I think probably like any other artist, it's developed over time. I think part of it is from the kind of music that I used to listen. I say used to because I don't sit around and listen to music the way I did when I was younger, which is sad but true.
Well, fair
I
enough.
honestly prefer silence, right? A little more. I still listen to music. I mean, my daughter and I were fixing dinner last night. We were playing music, but I used to really listen to music. I mean, hours of music a day, obsessively, like listening and analyzing and listening to film scores and classical music and stuff like that. So that was like early career. That was a big part of it, was listening to, I mean, anything from Tchaikovsky to John Williams, Berlioz to Jerry Goldsmith, and trying to figure out kind of the orchestra side of things. Then, after probably 10 years doing games mostly, I think the kind of the other half of my personality, musically speaking, started to come through. And it was more or less purely through the kinds of projects that I worked on. One of the biggest ones in the first half of my career was Deadspace, which was a big horror title.
That's
and
right.
I learned a lot about sampling and kind of, what kind of scary music I think is scary and how to scare people. I did 3 of those games. So you can't work on that much music. I mean, like 7 or 8 hours of that kind of music and have it not seep in to everything that you do one way or another. Same thing with my music background. I played in bands. I mean, I played drums. I started out as a drummer. We'll just say that. I started out playing drums, drum set.
Yeah.
And then I learned percussion. And then I was taking like snare drum rudiment lessons, and I was taking vibe lessons and marimba lessons and timpani lessons. But I was also teaching myself guitar. And then in college, I picked up bass. So, and I had piano lessons as a kid. So like the band instruments were sort of my kind of happy place. I played keyboard in a blues band in college. I played bass in another band in college. I played a drum set in like jazz bands and steel drums and African ensembles and anything I could get my hands on. So
Wow.
there's a lot of that drummer rhythm section kind of mental processing going on a lot when I'm working on things. Now, I like your question because I think the first half of my career, I had that turned off. I didn't want to consider it because it seemed like the easy out, right? It seemed like the shortcut, as opposed to listening to real composers like Tchaikovsky or John Williams or someone like that. So I was really studying the orchestra thing. And then after about 10 or 12 years, I started kind of looking more internally, and I realized that everything I thought was like my biggest weakness, being a drummer, having this ingrained sense of rhythm, thinking of like a time signature or a tempo or a groove before I thought of a melody. That was
Right.
actually one of my biggest strengths. So I really embraced it. And I think if you take that drummer, rhythm section, band idea and the whole orchestra, John Williams, Tchaikovsky thing and kind of mash them together, that's where I pop out at the end and go, "Hi, it's me, I'm Jason."
So did you reach that conclusion all on your own, or did you have a bit of guidance? I know you worked under Jerry Goldsmith. Did he give you any direction?
Well, back then it was so early on. He was very encouraging. I was mostly just like, "Oh my gosh, it's Jerry Goldsmith." Same thing with Elmer Bernstein, because I learned under him as well. As a matter of fact, one of my very first games was like adapting Elmer Bernstein's score from Wild Wild West for, I can't remember the platform. Maybe it was DS, maybe it was something else. But I had the gig and I called Elmer. Actually, I called Elmer's wife because she's the one that organized everything.
Right.
And she invited me out to the recording session. So I'm in North Carolina, but of course they're in Los Angeles. So I got to fly out to LA and go to the recording session for Wild Wild West and like sit with the director and talk and hang out with Elmer. I got all the scores, the printed scores, and was able to implement the music accordingly. But that was all because I knew him and did some work with him in school. Same thing with Christopher Young. I learned a lot from Chris, basically because he just handed me all of his CDs and gave me his personal score, conductor's score, like the orchestra score to Alien, to Goldsmith's Alien. It was like, here's everything you need to know about horror music. So each one of them kind of had their own impact on me. But I think that's another reason that I was so orchestrally kind of motivated those first 10 years or so. It was the biggest hole in my sort of repertoire. I wanted to learn more about orchestration and melodies and why do I get goosebumps when that one chord goes to that other chord? It's just, wanting to better yourself.
Because it's very hard, I feel, in orchestra to very much have that very distinctive sound, right? Because so many people have used orchestra, right? But you use it in very unique ways. Like, say with Order 1886, you use mostly strings, right? I think pretty much the entire score is just strings. Was that always the idea when you started that?
Oh, definitely. That one was with Ready at Dawn, and I think they had one word they described that they wanted the score to convey. A lot of times, especially at the beginning of a project, I'm trying to get like colors and ideas for the music out of the developers. And I think they get stuck trying to talk music. Maybe they don't know a flute from an oboe and they think that's going to hold them back. So I try to get general words. Are you looking for something dark? Are you looking for something, with a lot of motion to it? Just descriptions or emotions. And they said, wait was the word they were looking for. So the general idea was to use just all these low instruments. So yes, it's predominantly strings. There are no violins. Normally the violins are about half the orchestra. So there are no violins. Instead, there's double violas and double cellos. So when you hear these strings playing, you really do get this extreme sense of weight because there are all these big, low, heavy instruments. And then we had 12 woodwinds, but they were all, if you normally have maybe 8 woodwinds in an orchestra, there's like one guy that would be playing the really low woodwind instrument, the one that's sticking up in the back of the room because it's so tall. We had 12 of those.
Wow.
And same thing with choir. It was all male, and I think we started with basses, which is normally the lowest bass, and then we did contrabasses, I think is what they're called, who can sing even lower than that. It's in a way, Reese, it's kind of like cheating, because when you pick an ensemble that unique, chances are no one's done that combination of instruments before. And then whatever I write, even if it's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, it's going to sound really different and unique just because of the instrumentation, right?
Yeah, it's a very, very valid point. Very valid point. So are you going out of your way to try and find that unique thing every time, or are you just or I just do what suits the project? Or whatever the guidance is, I suppose, from the director of the project.
Both, right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's like, what's going to be best for the project? What does the client want? What is interesting for me? So let's say I'm doing 2 horror games at the same time. The last thing I want to do is have the same set of instruments between both games, because already with my palettes bleeding together, it's going to be hard to kind of creatively feel like I'm doing something new and original using the same group of instruments. So the more diversified and original and unique I can get with the instruments, whether it's orchestra or not, but especially orchestra, because like you said, it's very, we've all heard that kind of stock Hollywood orchestra, like it's this big sound, which is amazing, of course, and I have done that a little bit. But I'm a lot more interested in the smaller, more unique ensembles.
Fair enough. So do you actively chase projects on like a game or television or whatever, or do people just approach you? I suppose particularly after Deadspace, which was, I think, what really put you on the map.
Yes, it was. And, I think it's a tribute to the game community in general that after that game came out and got the kind of notoriety it did, I wasn't overwhelmed with a whole bunch of horror game companies saying, hey, we want you to do exactly like what you did for Deadspace for us. And I have worked on other things. I worked on a fear game. I worked on Until Dawn. I've done all the Dark Pictures anthology games, but they never asked to copy Deadspace. They wanted their own unique thing. And to answer your question about chasing projects, it's tricky because, especially with games, by the time they're publicly announced, they're already 90% of the time well underway making the game, and they already have a composer. So normally I'm contacted by the developer years before any sort of an announcement or any kind of public interest has come around. And it's an invitation to start collaborating, basically. And I've been fortunate enough that enough of them come in so that I'm working and I'm not sitting around for 2 months going, oh wait, let me see what games might be coming out so I could contact them and ask if they need a composer. It just seems to sort of self-generate now, which is really nice.
Right. But it must be frustrating if you've been working on a project for, like, say, 2 years and you can't tell anyone, right? You go and have a coffee with someone, they're like, oh, what are you working on? Oh, just something, can't say.
It was weird and awkward for probably the first 10 years, and now it's to the point where it's so ingrained in my brain that when the game's actually released and I can talk about it, I feel like a sharpshooter is going to take me out from the other side of the room. It feels strange actually talking about it because I'm so used to silence and just having no input whatsoever in terms of projects I'm working on. But I have to, because there's right now 7 or 8 different things in various stages of development, and
right.
It's almost impossible to remember, like, okay, one of them said that I could say something if I wanted to, and then the other one, like, the publisher doesn't want you to say anything until the game actually comes out. Even if I'm already announced as the composer, I can't comment on it. I have to wait until they get... It's just like, okay, I don't say anything until the game's released. It's just easier.
Yeah, fair enough. Otherwise, it gets very complicated.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah. So I'm interested with Deadspace. When you're doing a horror game, particularly when it comes to jump scares, like, or anything like that, like, how are you deciding how to implement the music, right? Like, particularly when a scene's coming up, that's probably going to cause a jump scare. Like, how do you decide what you're going to implement? implement in that section? Do you incorporate, like, is it more like, are you blurring the line between music and sound design more during that time, or are you just focused on having some instrument just blast out like a string that's like really high? I mean, which is like the cliche thing, right? But
Right.
I've always been curious as to how someone decides to implement that jump scare, because a lot of the jump scare is actually in the shock of the music sometimes, right?
Or the audio, right? I remember, what movie was it? I think it was The Ring, like the American version of The Ring. They just had, this was years ago when it came out in theaters, but I saw it in theaters, and they had some sort of a jump scare. They were going into a closet maybe, and there was like a person like, like who had died or something. And it was super quiet, and when they cut to it, it was just like static, like but it was really loud. And everyone in the theater jumped. So it's timing. And of course, there's the sort of the cliche, everything getting quiet, before the loud thing hits, because whether you realize it or not, you're mentally, if not physically, kind of leaning in and paying more attention because things get quiet. And then yes, it's definitely, I think if you played a major happy chord, maybe it would be startling, but it wouldn't scare you, if you know what I mean. It needs to have some discordant, like dissonant kinds of things. And usually the more kind of like pitch bendy, something that sounds like a scream or a cry is usually the best, because that's psychologically just tapping into our inner psyche, and your brain says, run away. Because some animal or something is screaming, and I'm next. I need to get out of here.
Yeah. Because you're very good at knowing when less is more, I find. Like, you're very good, like, of knowing when to build up tension, and then when you have, like, a minimalist type of approach where the music is quite subtle. Like, is that
well,
something...
If you're
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, is that
go
something that you've kind of always been in tune with, or is that something that you had to fine tune over time? Is it because of direction? Is it all three?
Well, it's all three. Yeah, I mean, it started on the first Deadspace, and that was a masterclass in kind of suspense that I was fortunate enough to be able to take, because the audio director Don Vecca on the first Deadspace had a very specific idea about what he wanted to do in terms of the sound and the music. So there was a lot of back and forth in terms of what the music needed to sound like, and eventually I'm sort of the one that fell into that orchestra as a necromorph, which the necromorphs are the sort of mutilated corpses of people in Deadspace that you're fighting. And I thought, well, if these necromorphs are coming from people, I'm going to necromorph the orchestra, because we're talking about screams or unrecognizable kinds of sounds. Well, the orchestra's got that in spades, so I can do that kind of a thing with the orchestra, and it doesn't need to be just on the jump scares. There's actually music playing through the entire first two games I know of all the time, but that first level of music that's in the background that you don't really notice unless I hit the mute button and you'd be like, where'd all the tension go, is mostly strings, but there's just lots of sort of just these like kind of staticky, dissonant, like clusters of things ebbing and flowing in the background. And that all just came from experimenting with the musicians. We had to record everything live, and I learned a lot, both from working with Don and from working with the musicians. But it's definitely one of those learning as you go. And I remember not knowing if anything I was doing was really going to work, because we had two separate recording sessions. And after the first session, it was in Seattle, and EA's in San Francisco. And we did the session, and Don took a hard drive, and I took a hard drive. But we both flew back to San Francisco, and I think he had spent that morning, I was like meeting with the producers or something, and he was doing something else. So the session had been over the day before, and I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I just spent half the live budget. I hope this is going to work. I'm not really sure if it's going to be the right thing. And after lunch, I see him, and he pulls me inside. He's like, okay, you got to check this out. And he shows me kind of their first, like, it's really dark in the room, and you're walking down this catwalk, and there's a necromorph coming towards you. You can't even really see it at first. You just kind of hear something like, like this weird sort of sound effect, like dragging his limb, and you see this thing kind of going like this, his arms are all up. And the music started when you first started hearing him, and it was that tone, that sort of just like static, like texturally dissonant thing. And then things started bubbling and moving, and he came up, and I think it just kind of cut. And I said, oh my gosh, that was amazing. What was that? He's like, dude, that was your music. But I had recorded so much little abstract bits and pieces of things. And it was literally the last 2 previous days. My brain was fried. But that was the sort of defining moment of like, okay, what Don said he wanted the music to do and what I heard the music doing in my head are like, we're right on point. We're seeing completely eye to eye. And then we kind of move forward from there with that idea of abstract textures.
Yeah. So do you have much oversight in terms of how music is implemented in games, or do you just hand that over to the audio guys and they implement it? So you could write a piece for a particular scene or area, and then they go and they take it and they apply it to somewhere completely different. And you're like, oh.
That could happen. It depends on the game. Usually the bigger games, I'm more involved with the implementation. Either implementing it myself, maybe if I'm not doing the final implementation, I'm like loading it into the like Wise, a lot of times is Wise. So I'm kind of doing the mixes and the stems and the layers of interactivity, and I'm building those into Wise for maybe the audio director or the music editor to pick up and go from there. Sometimes I'm just sending audio over the internet and someone else is implementing it. But I'd say 99% of the time, there's always been a lot of discussion beforehand between me and the audio team about what the music needs to do and where the music's going to be going. And then once it's implemented, there's always gameplay captures, or I've got a dev kit here and I can play through. And everyone's like overly sensitive to if they think if I think that they put the music in the way I wanted. And a lot of times they've got a better idea. I mean, I have a starting point, but they get their hands on the stems and they're, oh wait, this one thing, it just happened yesterday with the developer. There was a piece that I had written kind of for the beginning of the game, and they said, we love it, it's great. And then I sent them the stems, and they came back and said, oh, we took this one stem that you have from this cue from the beginning, and we're using just that stem over this really important other moment in the game because we love the idea of kind of calling back to that first moment. And then we're going to use that same stem at the end of the game as well. And it was like, great. And they played me the video over Zoom, and it was like, that's fantastic. And I wouldn't have known how to place that. They know the game a lot better than I do. So right. It's like anything else. Really, really good, proper coordination and cooperation, mutual respect on both sides, and everyone just trying to make the best game we can, regardless of the composer's original intent. There's always a better way to do something, right?
Of course. But I think that's actually the best way. But you know how there's some creative people that are very stuck and rigid in terms of, no, this is the way I created it, sure, and it must be this way. But I don't think you can really do that with games because it's such a collaborative process. I mean, there's so many levers that are being pulled, so many people involved. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons it's such a great creative community. It's not like a film team where there's like a director and he's got his cameras and he's shooting everything and he's like got his fingers in all the pies. This is a lot more people, a lot more technology, and a lot of things kind of all coming online at the same time that one person I mean, yeah, there's a creative director, but that creative director is handing off a lot of responsibility to other people. It's a much bigger collaboration. I think that's one of the reasons that that people enjoy playing games so much, is that they're made kind of by a team, and they're influenced by the team. Like, in a good way. It's like it makes it better. It's the lowest common denominator is going up. And maybe if you're Christopher Nolan, like, your vision is your vision, and that's fantastic. But there's only so many like really super amazing directors like that out there in film.
Yeah, totally. Is that part of the reason why you've done more game projects as opposed to, like, say, television projects? Is just because of that? Yeah. I mean, because that's the thing I've heard often, that it's a lot more collaborative. It's not as stuck up. It's more chilled, laid back. There's not as much pressure because you don't have a ridiculously tight deadline as well. You're nodding your head, so you're like, yep, pretty much.
And I did TV for about 3 years, 2.5 years. Recently, a bunch of different shows, and that's really hard just because of the deadlines. So much music needs to get done in a very short amount of time. But also, since I don't know who a big TV composer would be, but I don't have a lot of TV credits, so it's not like the showrunner was saying, "Oh yeah, Jason, just what do you think is going to work for this scene?" It's about the temp track, and with any series, it's like that, and it's about taking the temp track and making it work for the scene with all the little ins and outs. But what I do love about scoring to picture is doing that, all the little ins and outs of the scene, and when they pause and then the camera cuts and then someone looks and takes a breath and then starts to say something and then you see there's a gun, and being able to write the music around the scene is a completely different way of composing than with games, where most of the time it's like, give us a 5-minute exploration cue, and you have 5 minutes to do kind of whatever you want, both in terms of that exploration cue, but also in terms of, for me, they are saying, "Hey, Jason, what would be an interesting, group of instruments or an interesting sound that you think we could get for this particular game? Because we want something completely unique, and you're not going to have any temp tracks. You're really limited only by your imagination. What do you want to do?" That's hard to beat.
It must be exciting and scary at the same time, because you're like, oh man, I've got to try and think of something here, and at the same time it's like a new challenge. Yeah. So what was it like working on, say, Tomb Raider and Far Cry? Tomb Raider and Far Cry Primal, because you're basically taking over from another composer. So was there any kind of pressure to try and match your predecessors in terms of how they compose, or were you just totally going like blank slate?
It was blank slate for both of those. I think with Far Cry, because it was a completely other universe, prehistoric times. I did a very, very long, like 10 or 15 minute suite of music for Far Cry as my demo, and sent it to him. And it's funny because I think I spent a week on it. And when they hired me and I flew up to Montreal, they said, "If it's okay with you, we were going to play the demo and just kind of give you like highlights of what we liked, so you'd know what to focus on." I said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And it started with this conch shell, this like granular delay, big conch shell. That's how I started the whole demo out. And I think it was the like executive producer of the game or something. 5 seconds into the demo, he goes, "When we heard that, we knew you were our guy." I was like, "What?" I could have saved myself a whole week of time, instead of doing this extra like 15 minutes of music. But it's not like you just think, "Oh, I'm going to start with a conch shell." It was a bunch of other work behind it, and then the conch shell was discovered later, and I put it at the beginning as like a statement, like, this is unusual. You haven't heard something like this before. And that was the palette that we used for that game. I didn't use any of the demo. I ended up honing in even more specifically it was funny because I wanted it to be authentic for Far Cry Primal, so no metal or plastic or anything like that. And if you start thinking about it, I mean, if I went and pointed the camera to my drum set, there's metal and plastic all over those drums. They're wooden drums, but the heads are plastic and the lugs are metal, and you start getting all these percussion instruments and they've got metal jingles, and it was a big restraint. But as you know by now, I love the idea of kind of limiting myself. So I was using skinhead drums and making things out of like sticks and rocks and bone flutes and all this crazy stuff. And they actually one-upped me on it, and we split the score into 3 because there were 3 different tribes. So we went with each tribe and gave them a very specific sort of sound and specific set of instruments. So I was even more reduced into what I could do, but it ended up being a really terrifying at first and then creative, liberating experience, about like halfway through. It's like once you get about halfway through, you've kind of hit your stride and you're like, okay, I know what I can and can't do with these instruments, and I know what they expect in terms of the game developers, so I can feel a little less terrified, recording a brick smacking against another brick as a as an instrument.
Well, a lot of people do that as Foley work on films as well, right? So you're pretty much...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you're just doing a bit of that stuff. But obviously with Far Cry, you're not doing it for like a year or 2 years straight, or however long the development is, right? Because you'd be doing it for a bit, then you'd go off and do another project and then come back. And would you ever be like,
it was
wait,
funny.
What was I doing again? Yeah.
That actually is very true with most projects, but with Far Cry Primal, originally they didn't want any music in the game because, and I mean, I kind of get it. They're like, it's the Stone Age. It's like, let's just not do any music. Maybe we'll have like some guys like banging some rocks together and humming, and that'll be okay. We'll do a little bit of music. Maybe we'll do some cinematics. Let's get a composer. And I think I was hired for maybe 45 minutes of music, and that shot up to over 3 hours eventually. Which is great because they liked it and they kept asking for more. But the thing was, I was brought in rather late in the game, no pun intended. So there was, I think this was like September, and we were finishing basically in December. It's like 45 minutes of music. Yeah, no problem. I can totally do that. And then the next month they added an hour, and then the next month they added another hour, and then the next month they added another hour. So the music assignments kept piling up, and the deadline didn't change. It kept getting closer and closer.
No. A lot of all-nighters.
So that's, I think, I can't. I couldn't do that. But what I did do is I would record all day and record like 7 or 8 minutes of music, and then I hired someone because I had no other choice to come in and basically export everything, because there were all these stems. I mean, it took like 3 or 4 hours to export everything. Half a day of work if I were sitting there doing it. So my assistant was working all night. Like they worked from like midnight to 4, and then I came in around 5 a.m. and worked from 5 to 5. It was crazy, but we made the deadline, and the client, they loved it, and it's a cool soundtrack. So I'm proud of it.
Yeah, and it's quite different to a lot of your other work as well. Really shows your diversity.
I think that's one of the prime examples of being a drummer and having it be like, okay, I totally got this. Because everything was recorded live. I hardly edited anything. It would literally be, I would take this big log like you would throw in a fireplace and bang it on this like low couch table that I built out of 2x4s and plywood. But the thing is, you hit the log on the table and it was this oof, 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 like this bass drum. So I just sit there and record that for 3 minutes, like with a particular meter and some kind of a groove. And then I'd go over and pick up a clay pot that I'd smashed on the ground and tied together with string and hung on a stick. So it's very like crumbly with all the pieces. And I record that as a shaker part. And I would just multi-track myself as a drummer. And I mean, I played some whistles and did some grunting and like heavy rhythmic breathing and things like that, and just layered it all up. And it was one of those things. It's a very textural score, but that was on purpose. It wasn't supposed to be melodic.
Yeah, well, it worked. I mean, no one would have any idea unless you said this, that's exactly what you did. So, but it's a testament to the game, and it works, and it blends in perfectly. So you did very well.
As a matter of fact, I found out about 3/4 of the way through that they went through with their idea of having some guys in the game, or girls, and just people, like around campfires, like chanting and doing music stuff. So they recorded the vocals themselves, but they based all of the pieces, if I remember correctly, just on stems that I'd sent of different instruments, because they had all the instruments soloed, so they could just take 3 or 4 of the instruments from a track and animate characters in the game playing the instruments, and then they recorded vocals to it. So it really was like a seamless kind of like, hey, those dudes are just sitting around a fire, like banging sticks and rocks and singing. And
yeah,
that was me.
So how did Tomb Raider come about? I suppose you were just approached? I mean, because that would have been a lot of pressure, pretty much gaming's most iconic female protagonist, really.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is why I was pretty shocked that they just flat out called me and said, "Hey, what's your schedule like?"
That's pretty much what it was.
Yeah. It was like they said that they loved a bunch of other stuff that I'd done and wanted to know if I was interested in working with them. And the rest is history. It's the best kind of gig to get, for sure.
Yeah, totally. And did you look at any of the footage from like the older games to get any ideas?
No.
Or you're just like, nah, you just focused on the material that was given to you by Crystal Dynamics? Yeah. Yep.
And I didn't, I'm not a huge gamer just because I'm not very good. And being a composer and being on the development team just makes it worse, because if I do have a dev kit, I can put it in God mode. So I'm invincible and I have unlimited ammo. That doesn't help my case for being a bad gamer. So I'd never played Tomb Raider.
Well, that's probably a good thing.
And I didn't know the music. I didn't know the themes. I didn't know anything. And I ran away from any prospect of hearing it as soon as I was on board, because they wanted something new and unique and original. They wanted it to be fresh. That was easy for me.
Fair enough. But that must be really hard trying to compose, and like for a game where usually you kind of have to do some research, I suppose, on the game itself, right? But if you don't game much, and gaming involves a lot of time to invest in it, right? And if you're composing as well, which also takes a lot of time and investment, I mean, a lot of composers I speak to don't actually play games much either because of that. Even though that, you partly have to kind of research what you're doing, just so you know where cues go in the interactive space, because that's what it is. It's an interactive medium, really.
Yeah, it'd be like trying to score a movie without seeing the scenes that you're working on. So I do think, getting gameplay capture is a big benefit, because for me, I've got the movie, even if it's 25 minutes long and it plays through like the whole level of that game, and even if they're playing through a lot quicker than a normal player would, it helps me to kind of see the pacing of the gameplay and hear the temp sound effects. Maybe they might have some music from another level I've written temped in there, but that's the very least that I do, is I'll have that as a movie, either just looping in the background, like on mute, or I'll even put it into my DAW, into my computer, if I'm doing like an exploration queue, and I'll just find the explore part and have that playing, and the music is playing while I'm working on it. Explore video of the game is in the background. But I'll also do live gameplay, like me playing on a dev kit. That it just takes more time, like you said. That's when I'm spending 45 minutes playing and not 45 minutes composing. So a lot of times it's just a matter of schedule as to whether I have that kind of luxury. Now, some composers will play the game like more than the developers. They'll just play all the time, and that's how they get their like creative juices going, and that's great. I mean, it's everyone works differently. So whatever you need to inspire you, I say go for it.
Yeah. Because how often do you compose a piece and then you submit it and then the developer's like, nah, go back, start again? Does that happen often, or usually you nail it?
Yeah, I don't. I think that I'm a really good listener, and I only realized this after I've been in meetings with another composer or two, and we've talked to a developer either about like demos that we're working on for that game, or maybe they're working on part of the game, I'm working on another part. And sometimes we come out of these meetings literally listening to the exact same kind of game pitch, and we have two completely different ideas about what the music should sound like.
Oh, wow.
I think a lot of it for me is I'm kind of like an empty vessel. If I'm thinking about a new score, I have no preconceived ideas about instrumentation or style or anything like that. I'm really relying on the gameplay and the developers' input, kind of the emotional guides for the game. I mean, anything from their color palette to their environments, that's all informing what I would do for the music. And I think as a result of that, it's not really me as a composer saying, here's your first song, as much as it is the developer and I, the audio director, the creative director, whomever, the team, we're all working together to come up with this idea. Tomb Raider is a perfect example. I did like maybe a 8 or 10 minute suite of music that went kind of from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And it started out simple with her piano theme, and by the end it was sort of the big heroic version of her theme. And even as I worked on that piece, I was sending examples to the audio director and the music team, and we were sort of, well, I don't know, maybe this could be a little bit that, and there was no start over. It was just like, oh, it was always like, you could do more there. You could make that bigger. You could make that a little scarier. You could make that more dramatic. You could make that more action oriented. And by the time we finished the suite over a 2-week period, and this is like, I mean, conference calls, like with the executive producer, the creative director, the audio director, and I think maybe even someone from the publisher. It was a very good, involved process with a lot of people. We had all kind of arrived at this sound like as a team. So when it was time to hit the ground running, actually writing the music, it was just like, yes, please. Okay, great. Yes. Just, that's the way I like to work. And there have been maybe 1 or 2 games where I don't think that's going to work. And usually it's just not a good like creative fit for me, because I'm not the darts at a dartboard kind of guy.
Right.
Like, oh, that track's okay, but let's try something like this instead. What I thought you wanted to try. Well, you know what? That doesn't really work, does it? We should try something more like this, and sort of just randomly going in different directions. That's usually a red flag for me, that maybe someone hasn't thought this through yet. And it's better for them to kind of get their creative vision together and figure out specifically what is going to work so that I can do my work better. But I mean, I think of how many hundreds of games I've done, that's happened like twice on 2 very small titles that I wasn't even doing a lot of music for. The big ones are usually very well organized, very well thought out, and just creatively, they know exactly what they want the game to do. Maybe not the music, but they know what they want the game to do. And then that's where we start our relationship, kind of building what the music needs to do to like elevate that same idea.
Right. I suppose that's because they're big projects that there's so much more planning involved, so you kind of have to have everything nailed before it even gets to the point where someone's asking you to be on the project. As opposed to maybe an indie game where, they're just winging it. Not that I'm saying that indies wing it, but it probably doesn't need to be involved as much in terms of the planning. Probably similar with, like, say, blockbuster films and indie films as well. I mean, the level of planning
I think that's
just...
a good comparison. And it's just the number of people too, and the amount of data that everyone's moving. If you have an indie game, maybe 12 or 15 people on the whole team, and the music is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. If you have a AAA game, you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and you're talking about hours and hours of music. So there's a lot more responsibility there to sort of get everything lined up and headed in the right direction at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the Dark Pictures anthology. Like, how did that come about? That seems like a cool project.
Well, it's very cool, and that is basically the same thing as Tomb Raider, where I was contacted and asked if I would be interested, but a little different from Tomb Raider. I worked with this developer before on Until Dawn.
Yeah, that's right.
And we hit it off really, really well. It was fun because with Until Dawn, it was just Barney Pratt, the audio director, and I. And he was, I mean, literally, it was just Barney and I. He was responsible for doing all the audio, all the sound effects, managing the voiceover stuff. It was kind of their first big game. And I did the music, and then he did all the implementation, which was very, very, very involved. And on top of that, they went from PS3 to PS4, I believe it was, because it was supposed to be like a move title for the PS3.
That's right.
And then we had the console thing where I think I had some crazy amount of projects, and every single one of them within 2 weeks was put on hold for like 6 months because the PS3 to the PS4, like some titles were getting paused, other titles were getting pushed because they were going to be launch titles for the PS4. It's a very traumatic experience when a new console's coming out. Like everybody loses their minds. But through that trial by fire, Barney and I really got to know each other. And I mean, he's stayed at my place. I've stayed at his place. My kids have been over to London. We've like picked blackberries together, and we've been friends forever now. So it was just one of those, I think, natural relationships to carry on with when Man and Medan came out, the first Dark Pictures game. And we've just been working and having a blast trying to do, it's like I said, 2 games I'm working on that are horror one day after the other. Well, this would be like Man and Medan versus Little Hope. You know, we don't want them to sound the same, but they still need to be scary. So what can we do to make them unique, but also to keep them kind of differentiated from each other?
Yeah. So do you think you'll always be associated with those franchises, like the Dark Pictures anthology and Deadspace, or will you hand the reins over to someone else at some point? Or are you always going to be like,
I'm happy to have someone else, someone else's name associated with scary games. I think they've got a little bit of a hill to climb, unless their last name is like Bloodborne or something. I mean, I've had so many people assume that Graves was my stage name because of Deadspace. I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, I got made fun of in elementary school because my last name was Graves. And then, of course, Tomb Raider. They're like Deadspace and Tomb Raider, and the composer's last name is Graves. That can't be a coincidence. So, yeah, please, someone else, come pick up those reins. I'll happily hand them over.
I don't mean in offense when I say this, but like your face completely subverts expectations because you look like you've got a very innocent face. So, like Graves and horror games, it completely subverts expectations.
Yeah, I think there was an article that I did, like a print article, where I did an in-person review, like at GDC or some conference, where I met the person, and we did this article on Deadspace. And the first paragraph was something like, describing the game and how it's so scary, and then describing the music and how it's terrifying, and saying one would picture the composer for this video game to be like tattooed with piercings, long hair, and a leather jacket, like a gruff voice, and maybe they don't even give you the time of day until like they've had their 3rd cup of coffee. I'm like, right, that's not what Jason Graves is like. And it's funny because I've always been very, very upbeat and happy, and actually really love writing melodies and like pretty music. But I think the drummer part of me can really get into that guttural, scary thing, and that's sort of where it took off, right? So I'll just be smiling as you're running for the hills.
But it's good because the stereotype, you erase that stereotype that if you do horror games, you've got to be all goth or something and black nails and black hair. And so, yeah, and tattoos. So, yeah, no, it's good. It's good.
Exactly.
And you mentioned you do nice music. Like Moss's music is really good, man. Like, really good. Like,
oh, thanks.
Yeah.
We have a lot of animals here. I mean, like dogs and cats and stuff, but we also have like chickens and tortoises and bearded dragons and tarantulas, and we have lots of animals, parrots, doves, and Moss had all these animals in it. And even when I was just starting on the demo for the game, there were a couple little cute figures kind of like dotted around the description of the game, and I was just showing it to my wife, and I was like, I have to score this game. This is the game I've always wanted to score, but no one's really given me the chance because they just think I'm that guy with tattoos and long hair and a like severe attitude. And even the audio director called my agent asking for another composer. I don't remember who it was, but asking for another composer and some additional ones. Like, hey, is composer XYZ available? And maybe a couple of others. We've got this game. We'd like a demo from them. And she said, oh, that one's not available. But you know who I think would be perfect for your game, is Jason Graves. And he laughed and said, it's not that kind of a game.
So you kind of really had to fight for it.
Well, I think I didn't have to do any fighting because my agent basically said to him, like, trust me, you'll be pleasantly surprised or something like that. And they did I don't know who else submitted demos, but they did a blind listening of all the demos. And it was a team of like 12 or 15 people at the time. And everyone unanimously picked mine. And no one knew it was mine. So it was the easiest gig I've ever gotten because I didn't have to stand up for myself and say, no, just let me. I can write a pretty melody. Like, just give me the chance. I got to do everything I wanted, and they loved it. And that score was just such a blessing to be able to work on. It was just amazing.
Considering your resume, and like you've won British Academy Awards, how do you stay so grounded? Because it would be very easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm great, I'm amazing, particularly after winning awards and scoring so many games. But you seem very grounded through it all.
Well, thank you. I don't know. I guess I've never. I don't want to sound negative, but I've always been more focused on what I don't know or what I'm going to be learning tomorrow. How I can improve myself, how I can make the music like that much better, either with the mix or the composition or the way I'm recording and what microphone I'm using or whatever. I've been a lot more focused on that and what I work on day to day than, what's this gonna. How's this going to play during awards season? Or I wonder if the developer is going to... I just don't really think about that, which is... I know, it's like the whole Catch-22 cliche, like, oh, I don't care about awards, says the guy with 10 Academy Awards or whatever. But it really is that sort of a thing. I think... I just kind of assume that everybody else is better than I am, and it's kind of like that Groucho Marx thing. He said something like, I would never be the member of I would never join a club who would have me as a member. Like, there's that kind of distinction there, and even with the BAFTA, like for Deadspace, which I'm still pretty sure I was riding the coattails of the game. The game was amazing. And as a result of the score being so well implemented, like I was kind of able to get notoriety through that. I just lost my train of thought.
That's all right. Do you ever have to like plan a speech in advance and read it in front of the mirror, or you just kind of wing it when you get these awards?
No.
Yeah. Do you like that stuff?
I've always been. Well, I like entertaining people, and I did musical theater and even some commercials and acting and like dance and stuff like that growing up, all through elementary school and middle school. And then even in high school, I was like giving speeches, and I've always been very comfortable in front of people. So I don't really like the idea of going up and accepting an award, because then I'm afraid that I'm going to forget to mention someone. But if you're talking about like, hey, Jason, do a presentation on the music for Moss in front of 500 people, I'd be like, yes, please, let me do that. That sounds great, because obviously I have no problem talking. And I like the idea of like educating people and maybe helping them. Maybe there's one thing in that talk that another composer hadn't thought of before, and they're like, oh, I could totally do that. You know, relaying your experience and helping others benefit. That's sort of my like happy place.
That's a good segue, actually, because you studied at the University of Southern California, right?
Yep.
Have you ever gone back to like do any like guest lectures or anything for like the students there?
No. I know when I went through, they were very focused on film and TV. Now, and the director at the time I was very close with, and he passed away like maybe 5 years after that. So I'm not sure who's in charge of the program anymore, but I know there's so many composers in LA.
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
game as well as film and TV. So I don't think that there's, you know, a lot of looking outside of Los Angeles County. You know, I've seen stuff. They go and see Thomas Newman and Marco Beltrami, and I mean, I know those are big film guys. I don't know if I guess they're doing games with the program. They probably are. But I do talk at other places, and
because I had Gary
that doesn't
Scheinman.
surprise me.
I had Gary Scheinman on here. Yeah, and he does lectures there. And he says that traditionally what's happened now is that, well, back it used to be always television and film, and now as time goes on, a lot of these younger students are more interested in scoring for games than film and television. So
okay, so I completely blanked. I've spoken there twice, right? I went to Gary's class as a guest speaker.
okay, well, it just goes
like completely. Yeah.
That's all right. Well, you've done a lot of stuff, right? So it's hard to keep track, I suppose. I did read that you did a bit of stuff for like American Idol and Amazing Race and America's Most Wanted. Like, what was your involvement with that? Yeah. What did you actually score?
All the AATV shows?
Yeah. Like, did you do like, because I know sometimes with that stuff is you don't do, it can be a number of composers working on different elements, but what was your involvement with all that?
I'd say probably 80% of those shows are library tracks that were placed, usually exclusively through like a specific channel, like, you know, the Learning Channel or something like that.
Okay.
Back in the day when I was in LA, I had about 10 to 15 TV shows that I did that were custom scored, and those are on the list as well.
Nice.
I haven't updated it in forever. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, probably thousands of songs that are in a couple of different libraries that just get needle dropped places. And it's probably been 10 to 12 years since I've looked at my statement and like updated those shows, but it'll be literally like, what was one where I just laughed? Because I'll flip through, well, I'll scroll now. It's like hundreds of pages from my royalty things. That's how I can keep track of what the shows are. And it'll be like, I didn't know I was pregnant. Wow, okay, that's a good one. But then there'll literally be like 20 or 25 minutes of my music across the entire, you know, season 10 or whatever season is playing at that point in time. Well, 9 months ago, because that's how long it takes for the royalty sheets. But yeah, it's mostly now library stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you must get a fair amount of royalties given the length of time you've been in this industry. Not just with like television, but games as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's It's definitely nice. The royalties from games are from soundtrack sales.
Yeah, yeah.
Or from like Sony and EA especially, they do licensing of their soundtracks. So I get checks like every 6 months, I think, from each one of them. And I mean, sometimes they can be fairly significant. And that's just, I mean, talk about icing on the cake. The game has already been made. I was paid for the music. And then this is other companies licensing the music. And then EA and I are splitting it. I've even seen a couple of shows where I'm like, that's my music. And 9 months later, there it is on the cue sheet, you know, from whatever. I think it was some music from Deadspace was in a documentary about the Titanic. That's the one that comes to mind immediately. What? They're like, iceberg ahead! And it goes, like all this creepy music plays. It was great.
That's hilarious. Oh, well, it's good for you. I mean, always good to get that royalty check, I suppose.
Most definitely.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose the good thing about doing what you're doing is, like, you probably haven't been affected that much by COVID. I'd imagine probably just the orchestra sessions, maybe when you're doing recordings, that would probably be the only thing I could think of.
I know some friends that were affected because of the live sessions, but as it stands, the last year and a half, everything I've been doing has been like, I don't know, musicians that record themselves. So, you know, a string player, a guitar player, a woodwind player, they all have their own studios at home, and we would have been recording this way regardless of lockdown.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we're basically in the middle of a 25-acre plot of woods that's surrounded by farmland. We've been out here for like 5 years. So we're already quarantining. It's like everything's kind of the same. I know it's been a lot worse for other people, and I consider myself very fortunate to be both busy and kind of already isolated. So it's... I joked to my wife after about 6 months. I was like, so when do I get this break where everyone complains about being bored and not having anything to do? And it just never happened. It's just been work. But I'm by no means complaining.
Yeah,
I love what I do.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you love what you do. Is there any project or anything that you haven't worked on at this stage that you'd like to do?
Well, I really love fantasy. Like Moss was a little bit of fantasy. It was sort of like, well, I made it sort of medieval fantasy in a way, but I'd love to do some more fantasy somethings. I don't know what, something that could be like big and epic, but I answer this in every interview and I'll probably never get it, but I really want to work with, I just blanked out on the developer. Yeah. This is what happens when you get me at the end of the day. Yeah, there's a couple of developers that I would really love to work with. And it hasn't happened yet, but maybe sometime. Who knows?
Oh, it'll happen for
Naughty
sure.
Dog.
Naughty Dog.
That's it. Naughty Dog. I really want to work with Naughty Dog. I just love everything they do. It's so well done.
Surely that could happen because you've already done some stuff for Sony. So wouldn't you kind of already have the in? You must know some people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know all the people that know all the people, but you got to understand, you're looking at like a 3 to 5 year window of these projects getting made. And maybe there's a couple of projects that overlap, but you got to find the right fit and the timing has to work out. And it's complicated. A lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, for sure. But in terms of fantasy, I suppose Lord of the Rings would probably be it, I suppose. Because they still do, Warner Brothers still do Lord of the Rings game.
They do. Yeah, maybe that's sort of like being like Star Wars is the ultimate sort of science fiction. Like I'd prefer for it to be a non-branded fantasy. Not that I couldn't do my own thing with Lord of the Rings, but I'd feel like Howard Shore was like staring me down from the corner. Even if the developer was like, no, we don't want to sound like Howard Shore. It's like Lord of the Rings. I mean, I would hear that music in my head the whole time, regardless of what anybody said. You know, it's nice to have a little bit of, like, blank slate, mentally speaking. Yeah,
less pressure as well. You don't have to meet certain expectations, I suppose. Help takes the edge off, I suppose. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know you're a busy man, so I'll wrap up there. thank you so much for doing this, for taking the time out. I know it's the end of the day for you, so, you know, things are all going around there, getting a bit of brain fog, and I suppose you've been working all day.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're all on social media, Instagram, Twitter?
Yep, totally. Yep. JG Music, I think, is most of my handles for Instagram, for Twitter, or maybe Jason Graves Music. One of those two will pretty much find you, right? Find me. And the website's just jasongraves.com. Bunch of like audio and music on there. Yeah, I'm always looking to touch base with folks. So reach out and say hey.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hey, Jason, thanks again. That's the show, everyone. Make sure you share, like, and subscribe. And support Jason. Go play his music on Spotify so he gets more royalties.
Oh, we won't even talk about Spotify. Don't even get me started.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, go listen to Spotify. Please, just listen to music in general. Thank you very much, Reese. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.
I really enjoyed it.
Yep. Okay, that's the show, everyone. Stay safe. See ya.